Let's do it. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, FreeCode, for having me. I am very excited. So, you want to hear a bad joke? Let's start with a bad joke. There's this person who goes to the doctor, and they are complaining that their arm hurts whenever they move it like this. And the doctor, they just said, but stop moving it like that, and it will go away. And that's kind of how I feel about Apple's response to the people who complained about the signal degradation on their iPhone 4. Because if you covered the bottom left corner of the phones, you accidentally bridged the little metal thingy that goes around it, and you get dropped calls and reduced bandwidth. And Apple's response, literally, were, you're holding it wrong. For me, to even suggest that this is the user's fault, that it's, yeah, let's call it not nice. Obviously, they did not test their stuff thoroughly, because otherwise, Engadget wouldn't have posted this on their blog. And it also makes me think about a principle, the principle of least astonishment. If a necessary feature has a high astonishment factor, it may be necessary to redesign that feature, meaning that apps, web pages, all of those things needs to act in a way that most users expect it, without surprises, no matter how cool that new feature is. There's a lot of confusion and uncertainties when it comes to UI and UX, and I get that. And some of you have probably seen images like this, where we have UI represented by the classic glass bottle of ketchup, and then we have UI that is represented by the squeezy plastic bottle. I actually don't agree. Then we have images like this, where we have before UX, it's the glass bottle, and after UX, we have the squeezy bottle. Or sometimes they even show designs like this. It's a regular UI, and then we have a beautiful UI after UX. But I'm now invested in ketchup, so let's go back to the ketchup again. I say that you can't just add UX like some magic pixie dust. We can improve on the UX, but I see it like this. Both of them has a UI, and both of them has a UX. What I'm trying to say here is, it doesn't matter if it's a good or a bad experience, it's equally as much a UX. Do I have a favorite ketchup packaging? I do. It's this one. And I particularly like this one. I'm overly excited about ketchup, and I don't even eat that much ketchup. But this one caters to both those who like to dip their fries and those who prefer squeezing it over their fries. So 2 for 1. So we can simplify it and say that the UI parts relates to what we put in our UI, and the UX part relates on how the users are using it. But as humans, we have limitations. Our sight is limited, our attention is limited, and our memory is limited. If we design with our limitations in mind, it will benefit the users quite a lot. And they will actually perceive our application as faster, easier, more intuitive, and many times even better looking, even if it looks exactly the same, but just work. So in psychology, there's something referred to as cognitive load. Basically, our brains are like a computer. We have a processor, a CPU. And if we have several processes running at the same time, the computer will get a little bit slower, it will get a little bit less responsive, and it's the same with us. Everything from distractions to conflicting information can pose an issue. Or having too much information, like this poor cat, for example. if we overload the users with too many choices or unnecessary actions, we will derail the user's train of thought, and we might even irritate them and make them slower. I'm one of those who rage quit if I get irritated with a UX. I do like some shopping though. Mostly lately it's been gadgets and Lego, and mainly online due to, well, obvious reasons. But there's no way that I will remember a credit card number looking like this. But if we break it up, it is so much easier to read and it reduces that cognitive load. So I would say, in a way, shopping, well, at least credit card and bank cards, are a very good example of how we can reduce that cognitive load. If we have a lot of information, chunk it up. But let's take a little bit more practical example, something you probably run into every now and then. And for those of you with sensitive eyes, blink because I'm going to switch to a light background now. There we go. This is, well, your average form, right? We have a bunch of data. We have a bunch of input boxes. It's even lined up. So what am I complaining about? Well, step into my office. If we put the labels on the left of the input boxes, we get a total of 32 visual fixations. So that's 32 places that the user actually needs to look at and read to understand what they're supposed to do. Now, we are also trained to read in a certain pattern. And in the Western world, we read from left to right, top to bottom, kind of like in a zigzag pattern, if you will. So that's a lot of zigzags. But by just moving them above the input boxes, we are decreasing the number of visual fixations for the users by almost half. But we can still do better. It's easier for the user if we first of all make sure that we only ask for what we need. Don't ask for stuff that is usually in a forum or whatever that is. In this case, is it really relevant data, what gender I identify with when I sign up for, let's say, a newsletter? Personally, I can only think of a few times when it's actually really relevant. I also removed age range because we can figure that out from having the date of birth if age is important to us. So let's say we do need the date. What we can do here is go from the 3 drop-downs to one single date of birth input box. And we can ask for a full name instead of both the first and the last, because again, we can make heads or tails of that. Now we still have a bunch of zigzag going on. So let's move it all into one row and see what happens. Well, we have for sure decreased the number of visual fixations by a lot. We are now down to 9, but we are also down under the scroll line, or it doesn't fit our screen. So again, we could ask ourselves, do we really need the address in this case? Or could we perhaps ask for that in a later state when we're actually shipping stuff? But let's say that we really do need it. We could easily split this up in consumable bytes. So we have 2 pages. Okay, what else can we improve on? Something I personally like a lot is when we are upfront with our users, because this will actually reduce their anxiety and stress about how far they are from finishing. So using a progress indicator encourages completion and might even get the users to trust us a little bit more because it feels more open and honest. We know, okay, so there's 3 pages or 15 pages. And this is one of my absolute favorites. If we give the user a head start by starting the progress indicator with some progress already made, it will increase the number of people that actually uses the form. Because we all strive for that achievement dopamine. And we are already halfway done with number one, with the first step, and we haven't even started yet. So that's one of my favorites. Let's also put the button right in the line of sight, going down in a straight line to the left. Because as a bonus, this is also more accessible if we put the button to the left side, if someone is using a screen enlargement tool, because they won't see it at first if they're zoomed in a bunch and we have put it to the right. But while we're speaking about the button, what does continue even mean? Could be that we're continuing with creating our account, continuing to the next step. Let's change it to something that is obvious. Next step. I will give you, though, in this case, when we are actually using a progress indicator, we might have gotten away with a continue. But I say it doesn't hurt to be overly clear, does it? Helping the users with smart defaults, so the user doesn't have to think about how we want the data to be submitted, is awesome. So if you look under date of birth, you can see instead of the enter your date of birth, we now have the actual format we want the user to put in. This is especially important, I would say, when we are doing international things, because we all write different versions of the order of the dates going on. So it's very good to be clear. And I know that there are amazing tools out there that we can use to be a little bit more regional. We can get that help in a lot of the development tools. So if you are able to do that, go for it. That's always the best case. If you are not, be kind to your users and ask for what you need. Letting the user know that they have succeeded is also very powerful. In this case, I have put a green frame around the input box. However, to be a little bit more inclusive, we should always make sure that there are other ways to figure out what's going on than depending on color alone. So let's add a symbol as well to be, again, overly clear. Another great tool is to mark the active input box. So if I go away from the computer, I know exactly where to pick up. If we also start it automatically on the first one, the number of people who actually will start to fill it in also increases. And of course, we follow around as they go. In our case, it's double the size of the original frame and blue. So this works both for those who doesn't see color, because it's at least fat, but it doesn't have a symbol. And for those who see color, they see that it's blue. And if you can, display the errors before the user submits the form. And please do not list a long list of them on the bottom or on the top or somewhere. Let them know where the issue is. And again, to elevate our color accessibility, we put in a symbol together with the color. Never put blame on the user by saying stuff like, you put in the wrong date. And be as clear as possible. Think for the user. Don't make them think, why is this wrong? Or how do they want that to be formatted? So in our case, let's change the error message to actually reflect the input format that we want. There we go. Now the user knows exactly what we're asking for, and we're not putting blame on them. So with just a couple of steps, we went from this to this. There are still a ton of things we can improve on, but I think we have come quite a bit. Other things we could improve on is always make sure we have an exit for the user so they can opt out at any time. Make sure that they can, in the UI, go back if they want to change something. Maybe they wanted to use another email. And also use a contrasting color for the input boxes. In our case, we're using a white on a gray background. You will see that I like cats during this talk. I hope you don't mind cats. Being consistent and not reinventing the wheel, so to say, will help the user. Things like following platform and industry standards are really important. The learnability will improve for the user, and it will feel so much easier and faster. What would you say this is supposed to be? I read it as a leaf. So if this is a button, what would it do? Do I have any guesses on what this leaf would do if I click on it? Or I can just tell you. We have one guess. Is that a guess? Let me see in the chat. Leave the app. Exit. Leave the app. Yeah, okay, the puns are strong here. Edit is another suggestion. Yeah. It's create a new, in this case, email. This is from a learning management system that we use at the school I teach at. You press the leaf to create a new message. Perhaps not the clearest symbol for that. And actually, in the beginning, I couldn't find this symbol. So it was well, I could find the symbol, but I couldn't find how to start a new email, which is probably more than I should share. But in my defense, in the rest of this system, there's 3 more places I can actually send emails or messages. They're using the pen, which is a little bit more standard. So it took me like a second or 2 in the beginning to figure out what was going on. They backed on it later, so now they're using the pen everywhere in the system, so I'm happy about that. But I think that it was supposed to be like a quill, or maybe they're showing that they're eco-friendly because we're sending electronic emails. I'm not sure. But we have a problem with create new, and that's that we have more than one standard. Twitter uses both a plus sign and a quill. Outlook is using a pen. We have stars, we have documents, and list goes on and on. Being this inconsistent will slow the users down. We're probably talking like a few hundred milliseconds or so, but all those milliseconds adds up. So avoid using different symbols for something that already is established. Of course, issues with going a little bit too far outside of standards and conventions can also be found in the real world. This is hands down my favorite fail of them all. Are you supposed to pee or wash your hands here? Now, for those who sits down doing their business, this makes no sense. And for those who stands up doing their business, it feels vaguely familiar and an accident might occur. Because I think there has been more than one accident because they had gone through the trouble and actually explained that you're supposed to wash your hands here. So yeah, we can see it everywhere. This example is from an in-flight entertainment system. You go in, you start a game, and the pause button is up here to the right. You start another game on the same platform, same in-flight entertainment system, even the same seat, and suddenly the pause button is up here on the left. Now, we are creatures of habit, so there's a high risk that we won't even see the button if we keep on moving it to an unexpected area. Or in the best case scenario, it will take us longer. So don't let your UI elements wander around depending on where you are in your solution. Like it or not, if there's a solution, stick to it. It's so much easier for the user. Hierarchy is important for so many reasons. For example, it will reduce that cognitive load that I mentioned earlier. So that's great. Because as humans, we don't read pages or apps, we scan them, which makes hierarchy really, really important. We need to figure out what is the most important feature of your application, or the most used. Hopefully, they are actually the same thing. What is the least important thing? Do I need to have it on screen at all times? Can I move it to a secondary page? And so on. And here's another theme change warning. I will now go over to a light slide. So save your eyes. So here's another example. We have a page with a list of posts. Could be a blog, could be a news site, could be whatever. In this case, it's a blog. So we are listing a bunch of blog posts here. First of all, we can use proximity to make it easier for the user to see what heading belongs to what preview text. And this is something that is sometimes not used enough, I would say, because it's hard to see exactly what goes with what. And what is it that we want to show you users on this page? I would say that we want them to find a post and click on it, right? So let's make the subheaders stand out a little bit more by either increasing them or decreasing the preview text size. And I will actually decrease the blog preview text because the font is large enough, and also you're not supposed to read all the text out here. You're supposed to find something you want and go inside and read it. So we have opened up a little bit more space on the page, so we can actually move the post down a little bit from the header. So what else can we do to show hierarchy? Well, all posts honestly might not be of the same importance. So let's make some of them a little bit less important. Which means that if I, as a user, go in here, I know that these 4, they are either the most popular or the latest one or whatever we have decided is the highest up on the hierarchy. So I can concentrate on them. Unless I'm a really super Doctor Who fan and I want to read them all, then I can go down and read the other 3 as well. So let's click on one of the posts. Now, let's ask ourselves, what is the least important thing on this page? Personally, I would say it's the header, because we already clicked on the header to go in and read about it. We already did that. And how often do we intend to read the header while we are on this page? I would say that maybe once, perhaps twice would be enough. Yet we keep giving it the biggest, loudest font of the whole page. So let's fix that. Now it looks like the subheaders are the most important part on the page. And I mean, they are important, but they're not that much more important than the content itself. So I have made them the exact same size, but bold. We don't have to be more dramatic than that if we don't need to. So the one on the right side feels more like something I'm going to read. The content itself is important. The one on the left side, for me, feels like I have 4 in-your-face elements that I keep reading over and over again instead of reading the content. And this is sometimes referred to as interference. Now, before we continue, please keep in mind that you should always use the proper tags if you are working with a web especially, because we want to make sure that it's accessible to as many people as possible. So instead of changing from an H1 to an H3 or H4 or whatever it could be, take your header and just restyle it instead, because that would be the better option for any accessibility tools out there. Okay, so if we want our user to navigate through our interface with ease, we need to design things in a way where we can take advantage of the natural human cognitive process. So we need to reduce that interference I talked about. Now, if it's arranged in a way that we understand the hierarchy, we will lower that cognitive load because we don't have to think about that. We don't have to seek out what's the most important thing. Some of you most probably have seen these kinds of examples before on the internet. It is so much easier to read the written color when it's colored neutral or incongruent colors. But when we color the text incongruent to the written color, we get interference and we have a harder time to process it. I mean, we still can read it, but not as effective. Here's another example of just that. In a lot of the Western world, we associate red with stop and green with go. Therefore, we get a slight conflict here. I don't know how many times I have read stop in the red, even though it's the green one that says stop. And I know it. I put it there. But this can also be found in the real world. I have an example of that. Like the Swede I am, I need to take you to a local IKEA. We have these plexiglass doors with LED lighting. So in, welcome, we have green. Sounds great. Blue, out, sure, makes sense. However, these doors are getting more and more popular and more common, at least here in Sweden. And you can also set your own color to light up that little frosted bit on the doors. So if your brand has a red logo, like ICA, and you're using red for the entrance, you will get that interference. Now, this is not my local shop, but it's fairly close. So I'm there maybe once a month or every other month. And every time I'm there, I walk up to those doors and I'm like, oh, no, that's the exit. And then I walk around and then I realize, oh, right, it's just red because ICA is red. So we get that interference. This is from a minimal of sorts, also close by here. We have very clear signage. You're supposed to go in on the right side, and you're supposed to not go in on the left side. Now you see, these are double doors. So we have some sort of foyer, or what you want to call it. So let's go in. All of a sudden, I'm not allowed to go in because the left side says out, but backwards because they're supposed to go out that way. And the right side that I walked in through has a cross over. So all of a sudden, I'm not allowed to go in. Not super clear instructions. Now, I will say, to their defense, they didn't think everything through. So they thought, let's fix it from the outside into the foyer and from the inside out to the foyer. They did not think things through that you actually will see this from the inside of the foyer as well. So I'll give them that. But giving your users clear instructions and also clear error messages makes all the difference. I mean, we all make mistakes. Stuff happens. And the user will understand that. But if we put up error messages like this one, the user will probably wonder what to do. Should they just press OK? Should they unplug the machine? Should they throw it out? I don't know. So this error message is just scary. Or this one from a bank in Sweden. Again, not helpful in the least. We have that warning triangle, so something is really wrong here, but I get nothing. Does this mean I lost my money? Do I still have an account? I don't know. Remember these? I mean, they are a little bit less scary nowadays. But as an average user, they don't tell me that much. And there has been plenty of research that has found that poorly designed error message will trigger a physical stress response by raising our cortisol levels. How cool is that? Well, not that people get cortisol and get stressed, but if we are not thinking about the user, we will stress them out, basically. So if we take the 404 page as an example, because again, now I'm invested. And I will say, these steps I'm about to show you is also applicable for all error messages, not just a 404 page. So what makes a good error message? Well, first of all, it uses plain language. And they sort of are here in places, but they also have a bunch of technical jargon that means, for me as an average user, I might not understand. Can even make me a little bit scared or at least hesitant. So let's remove all the tech jargon. I also removed the outline of the error message because it makes it look less like an error message and more like a page. Here we have no buttons, no URLs. We don't even have a suggestion on what action to take next. A good error message is actionable. At least have a home or retry. And depending on what your page does, you can put in a search box so the user can try to find what they were actually trying to look for. And I mean, that's to our benefit as well, because we will keep them on the page, right? Or the absolute easiest way, put in a link to the start page. The message itself should also be short, because it is kind of overwhelming having to read all that text. And honestly, very few people does. I know my mom does. She's really good with that. I don't have the patience for it. So for me, it doesn't add to the clarity. Explain how to fix it if it is fixable. In this example, we get a bunch of uncertainty because it might have been removed, it might have changed name, and it might be temporarily unavailable. Does that mean I can simply hit refresh and it will be solved? Or when will it be back up again? Will it be back up again? Is there another option I can try to do whatever I wanted to do? Of course, sometimes we can't provide a solution, but we can give options. So again, to be overly clear, I have made the start page URL here blue, so it looks like you can click on it. We can also use buttons and such depending on what you're doing and how your page is looking, of course. I added a few other URLs that I think can be of interest for the user. If we have a shop, we can add images or URLs to popular items and such, because that is super smart for us because we can maybe sell them more stuff, but it also makes the user feel a little less like a failure, and they will even feel like you were very helpful. And like I talked about when we talked about the form, never put blame on the user. Be humble about it. It's not the user's fault that we did not cover all things 100% that could have gone wrong. And in this case, we're not directly blaming the user, but we don't take responsibility either. Using words like error or something went wrong or failed will inadvertently put some blame on the user, and they will feel that like they did something wrong, at least a little bit. So in our case, we can remove the red, which is often in the Western world associated with an error or a warning in this case. And also I wanted to make it a little bit larger because I need to tell the user what went wrong. So for clarity, I made it larger. But I said, let's be humble. So let's own up to the issue. Again, it's me who can't find whatever you were looking for, regardless of what the user was typing. And be human about it, or true to your brand for that matter. It's okay to be funny, it's okay to be witty, as long as we also fulfill the other 5 points. So since this is some sort of cat page, I put in a little sad cat. So by doing these 5 steps, we have elevated the error message quite a bit. And again, this of course applies to all types of error messages, not just the 404 pages. But while we're talking about 404 pages, there are a couple of examples that I want to show you that I think does a brilliant job. For instance, TripAdvisor, they have a few that they cycle through, like this one. Now, as a traveler, I find this humorous because we're always scared about our luggage being lost. And they are taking responsibility. It's not scary, and it's actionable. And I think the other one they have says something like, this page is on holiday and you should be too, which again, I find humorous. Marvel Studios have a witty one as well, and they are taking responsibility, and it's actionable. And for those who are Avengers fans, they will find this humorous, I would say. And of course, I need to mention GitHub and their awesome Octocat. This is funny, but again, it's also actionable, which means we can do something about it. So that's awesome. I'm going to show you a real-time, well, not a real-time, a real time report system that I've used because I sometimes consult. And with some companies, I need to use a third-party tool to report my time. So I log in to the page and I click on go directly to time report. I get redirected to another page, which asks me to log in again. Now, if only there was a way for us to know that we already logged in. Okay, never mind. I log in and I get to this page, which has a completely different design, different colors, different everything. And I need to click time report again. Third time, I need to log in. This time with a different, well, sort of different. I needed to omit two letters, log in. And finally, I get to the report site, which I asked for on the first page. So I logged in here, and these pages have different designs and colors. This takes about 15, well, it takes about 16, 17 seconds, really. I have timed this many times because I like data. Now, I am very impatient, but if the UI actually took me to the time report directly, which I asked for, it would take, what, a second? Maybe 2 seconds maximum, which means I waste 15 seconds every single time I report my time. Doesn't sound like much. And I did tell you that I am impatient. But it does add up to 5 minutes per month for one employee in one system once. Now let's say that this is instead an internal system that I need to use 3 times a day, like a learning management system or a sales tool or whatever it could be. It's not uncommon if we have some sort of internal system that we need to use it multiple times. Oh, and let's say that we are a mid-sized company that has 200 employees. Now this adds up to 600 man-hours that we are wasting every year. So now it's not just about my experience, my 15 seconds. It's about companies just wasting money on absolutely nothing. And as a bonus, we will also get a slightly more frustrated employee, which of course is not optimal. And this is also why it's always worth to put some time and effort into the internal system, even if the end customers and end user won't see it, if we're just internally using it. It's still worth it. I want to share my absolute favorite UX tool with you. And this is a tool that made my husband, who works as a developer, go from having, I hope he's not listening, quite horrible user interfaces until when he went all the way up to actually being responsible for UX at his workplace with just the help of this tool. So in development, we have a bunch of conventions that we could, or should, for that matter, follow. So we can boil down things to the bare essence, like the solid principles, or maybe KISS. And it doesn't matter if you have heard of these principles or not, just know that we can boil it down to the essence. And the same is true for UX, because there are hundreds of UX principles, laws, rules. We have so much research, books, we have tools, we have so much. But as developers, there's often not enough time or resources to study and read up on all these. And then there's the question, should we as developers learn everything about UX? I don't have the answer for that last question, though. But this is Michael Medlock and Steve Herbst. They used to work at Microsoft UX research team. And I've actually had the fortune to sit down and talk with these persons multiple times, which is amazing. But they too found that there are a lot of information about UX and sometimes a little bit fluffy information, my words, not theirs. But they found that it wasn't really clear why something was bad or how to fix it. And they realized this because they were obviously working at Microsoft, and Microsoft has plenty of development teams, and all the development teams have the same UX research or the same UX resources, and they have the same design team, everything, but stuff came back different anyway. So Xbox did one thing, and the Windows team interpreted it to another thing. So what they realized was that there's over 100 years of UI research. There's thousands of books and studies. But they also realized that to process all this might not be possible. Not all of it. Especially not that when all these awesome, amazing books and resources, as great they were not using the same language. So they started to boil this down to something a little bit more comprehensible, because the information is out there. They were just missing a simple vocabulary to talk about it. So they created something called tenets and traps. Now, this is a UI evaluation tool that can be used to increase the quality of our UI and UX already when we are planning our applications and webs, but also during the development and afterwards as a test. And this is an award-winning tool that is being used by companies like Microsoft, obviously, Facebook, Amazon, Oculus, Google, and so on, to catch those pesky UX traps. Now, this system is actually using the research and existing heuristic tools and what have you from people like Don Norman, like Alan Cooper, Ben Schneiderman, Jacob Nielsen, just to name a few of them. And of course, all the UX principles and laws. All boiled down to a deck of cards. I call it unfluffy? That's not a word. Not fluffy approach to UX, if you will. So this deck consists of 9 tenets, good things about UI. And then it also has a bunch of traps that degrades those good things that we want to have. So if we go back to this example with the leaf that I could not find, we would find that the leaf was effectively invisible because I saw it, but I could not see it because it wasn't what I was looking for. And it's also an uncomprehended element because what am I supposed to do here? And these two drags down the tenant understandable. And we do want our stuff to be understandable, right? So if we fix this, I will understand what to do here. Now, this system actually did fix it. And in this example, we are dragging down habituating, the tenant habituating, how easy something is to learn over time. And the trap here would be wandering element because the pause button was moving around in the system. And for this, we have a definitely unnecessary steps because I had to log in 3 times. I had to be on 5 pages instead of just click once and I was done. So the goal here is to show you that even if all the UX resources out there is fantastic, you can still rock your UX without reading all those books, without reading all those research, and without being a UX specialist. Now, before I sum up, I have another quote that I'd like to share with you. I really like this quote by Bill Buxton. We must adopt an approach that inherently inspires to the right design as well as get the design right. And I think this is such a good quote because it speaks to the importance of not only having a great UI, we also need to have it hand in hand with a great UX. So when you are developing, try to remember that there is a user at the end. Think about what your app is best at. What's the most important thing? And use hierarchy to convey that. Also think about what's the least important thing. Can we remove that completely? Can we move it to a secondary page just to reduce that cognitive load? And also think about how you are communicating with the user, especially when something goes wrong. Keep it clear and understandable. Thank you.